read all of chapter 9. I'm just going to read the verses that are pertinent to the main points that we're looking at. So I am going to read chapter 9, verses 1 through 7. And then I'll go back and comment on that. So chapter 9, verse 1, and God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The fear of you and the terror of you would be on every beast of the earth and on every bird of the sky, with everything that creeps on the ground, and all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they are given. Every moving thing that is alive shall be food for you. I give all to you as I gave the green plant. Or if you're eliminating italics, it would say, as the green plant. Only you shall not eat the flesh with its life, that is, its blood. Surely I will require your lifeblood. From every beast I will require it. And from every man's brother I will require the life of man. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he made man. As for you, be fruitful and multiply, populate the earth abundantly and multiply in it. So there's some interesting things, not a whole lot of things, but some interesting things that jump out to me in the first 7 verses. The first thing the Lord does here with Noah and family is to establish a social dynamic and a behavioral pattern. He blesses Noah and his family. He now tells them to be fruitful and fill the earth. This command was, we all know, given first to Adam and Eve, right? Mm-hmm. When was it rescinded? The flood? No. It really wasn't rescinded. Mm-hmm. But it was re-given. It was given in a new beginning. Everything else is gone. In a new beginning, God re-establishes that command that was first given to Adam and Eve. This also implies, it says fill the earth. So this also implies that they're not supposed to be bunched up into one place. All right, I'm not talking about cities and towns and stuff like that necessarily, but later on when we get to chapter 11, we find out that they sure enough disobeyed that. But they're not supposed to be bunched up in one place. They're supposed to spread out and fill the earth, right? Spiritually speaking, this can apply to the church today, does it not? Matthew 28, 18 through 20, right? Go ye into all the world. I mean, is there any place we're not supposed to go? Acts chapter 1, beginning at Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria and to the uttermost parts of the earth, you shall be witnesses. That word shall does not make it an optional thing. It says that's what we're going to do. And we all know that we're going to be a witness one way or the other. We're either going to be a good witness or a bad witness. I mean, one way or the other, we're witnessing. God establishes the fear of animals. Another thing he does with this societal dynamic is he establishes the fear of animals toward mankind and gives all of them as food for man. So in the antediluvian world, they were not given permission to eat animal flesh. Did they do it? I don't know. Yes, I could imagine a scenario where, that whole terrible part would have done just about anything. They did do just about anything. In fact, they were so blatantly evil that it caused God to take the position that he took. So they could have, but nobody was given permission. Now they are expressly given permission by God. And he gives a fear of man to the animals, a fear and a dread. Why would he do that? Well, looking at the food part, you could imagine that it would be a real easy, not even a stretch, to say he's actually giving the animals a chance. Because mankind and the animals had a different relationship before the flood. There was no fear of man to animal and animal to man. So you imagine if the animals were just sitting right here and you were hungry, you can just go take one right now. They probably won't even run away. That's just not, how fast is that gonna wipe the food supply out? Pretty quick. Even the unclean animals. I mean, he says all of them. He didn't put any restrictions here on the food. With the earth being physically different after the flood, and it is, meat consumption could have been necessary to support continuance, because now you have seasons. You can't grow, you're now growing seasonally. You're not growing everything all the time or whatever fancies. You have to grow it seasonally now. Now there's ways around that with greenhouses and high tunnels and all that stuff too, but basically the bottom line is you're now, they didn't have all that, I don't think, yet. So you're at the mercy of the seasons. So you got a food supplement there that's going to allow things to happen. The vegetation may have been different and would require more effort of a different kind to be focused on food instead of just going out and picking whatever was out there. Whatever you knew was good to eat. Like mushrooms. Debbie and I want to grow mushrooms. We want to grow mushrooms, something terrible. Neither one of us know anything about them except the kinds that come in the can. And the ones you grow in the field do not look like the ones in the can. So we're in a conundrum there. So we're trying to figure that out. But we got a few months. We're going to hopefully figure it out. The third thing God does is establish rules for eating those animals for food, but extends it to the killing of man. Right? Animals with their life or their lifeblood is strictly prohibited. It might seem on the surface that it means don't drink their blood. Do y'all think that's the reason? Does anybody think that's the reason? Personally, I don't. Based on the text and me not being a Hebrew scholar, but me being able to read other guys who are, it likely refers to eating them while they are still alive. It says eating them with their life, that is their blood. So I looked up the word life. I looked up the word blood, and blood is, as you would imagine, blood. But when I looked up the word life, it's actually translated like 300 and some more times than the next highest word. And I don't even know what the next highest word is, but the highest one is soul. S-O-U-L. So don't eat them with their life. So that's why I don't think it was just the blood. Otherwise, people eat blood pudding over in Europe and things like that, which I don't know how I would like that. Or eating liver or other various and sundry other lovely dishes like that I'm glad that I don't have to eat. Haggis, all that good stuff. But I think that it is in reference to, and I'm backed up by other commentators, backed up that it is with their life in them. You must kill them first so that their lives are not still in them when you consume them. That might seem like a semantical nightmare, but typically we kill animals. Even if we cook animals while still alive, they're dead when we eat them, right? I guess there's some guys out there that catch a tuna on the boat and slice into it and take a chunk. Maybe that happens. I don't know. I don't do that. I don't know. I don't know anybody that does, but I imagine it could happen. He also establishes what we know today as capital punishment. That is, if he's going to require from every man's brother who sheds man's blood. He's going to require the animals, right? How's he doing that? I don't honestly know, but we know he's going to require it of man. And that principle, although significantly watered down today, is still true. If you commit murder in some societies, you're dying. If you commit murder in other societies, you might still die. It just might take a while before it gets there. But the principle is still there even today. Capital punishment is what we know that about. The second thing that God establishes post-flood is a worldwide covenant. Verses 8 through 17. I'll read it real quick. I talked about it a couple of weeks ago. Then God spoke to Noah and to his sons with him, saying, Now behold, I myself do establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the cattle, and every beast of the earth with you, all that comes out of the ark, even every beast of the earth. I establish my covenant with you, and all flesh shall never again be cut off by the water of the flood, neither shall there again be a flood to destroy the earth. Two things there, really, right? God said, this is the sign of the covenant which I am making between me and you and every living creature that is with you for all successive generations. I set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a sign of a covenant between me and the earth. It shall come about when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the bow will be seen in the cloud, and I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh, and never again shall the water become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the cloud, then I will look upon it. I will remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature or that of all flesh that is on the earth. And God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant which I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth. So I think that we know what that is. It's the rainbow, right?
Right.
And there's one or two interesting things in there to me. Rain would begin to fall on the earth periodically from now on. The ecosystem's totally different. Didn't rain before the flood. How do we know that? Go back to Genesis 2, and then look at the flood, and then look at what he's saying here. And you're putting those pieces together, and you're coming up with it's not raining. But it did. And now you got 8 people off the ark, and they're going to start having kids. And those 8 people are still alive off the ark, and a cloud comes over, and it starts to lightning and thunder, and the rain's falling. Without this covenant, what are they going to think? It's happening again. I mean, that's a normal reaction. Is God judging the earth again? And we don't have an ark this time. We've moved a couple hundred miles away from the ark, or wherever they are. They're not camping out in the ark. They went out of the ark. So it's not an option anymore, probably. Right? So it will, in the earth, the rain is now going to promote the growth of that vegetation, the growth of that ecosystem that is now established, which before was just a greenhouse thing. It didn't require rain. Water came up out of the ground, out of the mist up out of the ground. You can also imagine that people would have blamed or mistrusted God if they didn't have that covenant and the rain came and it didn't destroy everything. What happened back here? What is he doing? Is he messing with us? I'm trying to be facetious. I'm just being a human being without total understanding of God who did these things, but he didn't establish this covenant, but he did, right? And this covenant is a sign that is visible 4,400 years ago, still today. And it says all creatures. I firmly believe that all creatures, even though deer is reported to be colorblind, they're just colorblind in certain spectrums, but I believe every creature can see a rainbow at some point when they look up. If it's there. And obviously when the clouds come and it rains, and we know what it is scientifically, right? It's water refracting, or light refracting through the water produces the colors. That's another reason why I don't think it rained before the flood, is because there was no refraction of rain through the clouds to give the rainbow. This came about after the flood, right? God created, and this is something else, God created the land to rise out of the water, Genesis chapter 1, created everything that moves on land, and then he caused the water to cover the land and destroy everything that he had created on land. 2 Peter 3, 5, and 6. He brought the land up, and then he brought the water up and destroyed it all, and now he's establishing a covenant that says, I'm not going to do that ever again. Never am I going to destroy every living thing by flood. And he hasn't done it 4,400 years later. And he's never going to do it. Because as we push forward in the Bible, we see that the next time, Peter talks about that, the next time it's not going to be water. And it's going to be a different kind of judgment. Or it's going to have a different dynamic to it, right? Obviously, the floods we have today are and can be very devastating. We've seen what happened down in the Asheville area, right? But there have been nothing, as terrible as they are, there's been nothing to even remotely approach what was experienced. Thirdly, God established a future covenant principle, verses 18 through 29. This is going to be a little bit of a long read, but I can get through it, and I'm moving fast. Verses 18 through 29. Well, that's 18 through the end of the chapter. Now the sons of Noah who came out of the ark were Shem and Ham and Japheth, and Ham was the father of Canaan. These three were the sons of Noah, and from these the whole earth was populated. Then Noah began farming, or it could say he began to be a farmer, and planted a vineyard. He drank of the wine and became drunk and uncovered himself inside his tent. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, and he told his two brothers outside. But Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it upon both their shoulders and walked backward and covered the nakedness of their father, and their faces were turned away so that they did not see their father's nakedness. When Noah awoke from his wine, he knew what his younger son had done to him. So he said, "Cursed be Canaan." I may have said younger son. The text says youngest. In this translation, it says youngest son. "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants he shall be to his brothers. He also said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant." Noah lived 350 years after the flood. So all the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. Pretty typical ending at the end, and he died. That is the destiny of all flesh in the end, right? So God established a future conduct principle. Verses 18 and 19 seem to be pretty innocuous and basic. But there's something interesting that leads to the rest of the story here. There's the short mention of Noah's sons who came out of the ark, right? Noah's 3 sons came out of the ark. But Ham alone at this point is mentioned as having offspring. And Ham was the father of Canaan. The text says Ham was the father of Canaan, not is the father of Canaan. I don't know the full implication of the difference of that in this context, but it could reference that Canaan was already born in the timeline by the time we get to verse 18 of chapter 9. I looked over in chapter 11, and Shem had his son Arpachshad 2 years after the flood when he was 100 years old. Okay? So is this plausible? 100% absolutely plausible. Is Canaan mentioned specifically because of the incident that happens a little later in the text? It could be that the text says this to point out what happens later. The Bible does do that. It'll say, it'll throw something in there, and then you read a little bit later, and it comes back to it. And we went through several instances of that in doing chapters 4 through 7, that it will say that, and then it'll come back around and give you more of a detail. So that's possible, right? But it says in verse 20 that Noah began to be a farmer, or began farming. Noah could have or would have learned farming from where? On the fly. How well do you know your Genesis? Not as well as some, and probably better than others. Chapter 5, verse 29. He learned it from his dad. Lamech was a farmer. Okay, now Lamech could have been referring to bigger things than just the toil, just the land itself. But, I mean, there's no reason to say that's absolutely the case. He could have or would have learned farming from his father, who was a farmer. He probably farmed regular things in addition to planting a vineyard, right? They would need food, and this is what he started doing. And I'm gonna throw you a curveball or two in a minute, and you can agree or disagree, and it's all good. Wherever they happened to be at this point, they probably were likely not sitting up on Mount Ararat, that plateau and that mountain range anymore. They've moved. They've come down, they've gone away from there. So wherever they were at this point, it seems that they settled down, at least for a while. Because farming implies putting down roots. And nobody laughed at that. Farming, putting down roots. Hey. Right. But I'm being serious at the same time. I just thought somebody would think it was funny. But it does imply putting down roots. You're not going to plant something and wait and harvest it. I mean, there are nomadic tribes that do similar things, but you're not going to like stick around and not watch it grow, or stick around and not harvest. In fact, he harvested grapes, or we believe are grapes. He harvested vine fruit and he made it into wine. There's a little bit of a process there. That's not happening instantaneously. It takes time for it to grow and produce, all of that stuff. So they put down a few roots where they were because he began to be a farmer. Wherever that was, I have no idea. They could have been 100 miles away. They could have been 500 miles away. It has been speculated that it would have been a minimum, and they go to the genealogies in 10 and 11. I didn't do this in-depth study, but they speculated it would have been a minimum of this incident, or when he became a farmer, would have been at least 20 years after they left the ark. I do not know the genealogy well enough to draw that out. It's real easy to do how long they were in the ark through the genealogy. Anybody can do that, really. But to get that out of the genealogy, by the way, here's a table over here that's a really cool chart. And it might tell us some of that, but I can't read it from here. But it's really cool, it's really detailed. It might give us a clue. Whoever brought that, thank you. I don't know who did.
Ruth Meredith.
Ruth Meredith brought it?
Meredith.
Ruth Meredith.
Oh, Ruth Meredith brought it.
Class that meets in here.
Oh, okay. That plays right to what we're talking about too. That's very cool. It could have been more than 20 years, but they're saying at least. At some point after Noah planted that vineyard, the fruit of the vine became fermented, and he drank it, and he got drunk. Right? It was speculated by a couple of commentators that maybe it was a result of a harvest celebration. Were they doing that then? And he drank, and he just drank way too much. It wasn't because of medicinal purposes. You remember Paul told Timothy, drink a little wine for your stomach's sake, for your often infirmities. I don't think we're here. I don't think you're going to be able to push to that and say he drank a little wine and he took a couple spoonfuls too much. I mean, he got drunk. He got really drunk. He got so drunk that it says when he came to himself, or when he woke from his wine. I mean, that's being pretty far gone. So he drank too much, and then what happens? Verse 21, I read two different translations, get two different things. One says he uncovered himself in his tent. The second was he became uncovered in his tent. Does that matter? I don't think so. Bottom line, He got drunk and he's uncovered in his tent. One commentator found it very ironic that the man who was sober when everyone else was drunk before the flood was now drunk when everyone else was sober after the flood. And that was just a point of irony that commentator shared. It tells me, though, personally, that we as humans, although declared righteous in Jesus Christ, and Noah was declared righteous by God, we're still prone to and susceptible to sin at any time of the day or night, and we don't have to get drunk to sin. It is in that Adamic nature. It is that old man that's running around in there that's supposed to be dead, but we keep trying to resurrect him, that comes to the front, and we do stuff, and we say stuff, and we know it's not right, and we say it, and we do it, and then we have to repent and come back to reality. Thank God that we're not living in a salvation based on works, because none of us would make it. You know? Even the best, and Noah was the best of his time, can still let our guard down. We can have a lapse. We can do dumb things, and some of it will lead to some really big harm. Fourthly, in this, the idea of being uncovered. So this is a real touchy thing for a lot of folks. Verses 22 through 24. Because we have an incident that has happened. I'm not going to read it again. You can if you want. I'm just going to go through my notes so that I can finish. So the idea of being uncovered here is being physically exposed but in usage of this word in the Old Testament, it is not limited to an individual exposure of physical nakedness. It is that, but it's not limited to that. Prime example that came to my mind was later on in Genesis. Remember, they had a famine in Canaan. And Joseph's brothers came from Canaan to Egypt, and Joseph's the prime minister, and they don't know it, and they come to buy grain because the famine's really bad in Canaan. And Joseph accuses them of being there to spy out the land and expose the nakedness of the land of Egypt. In this context, this same word is used that would expose their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities, and expose them to potential attack or subversion. So to lay them bare, right? Their secrets laid bare. I'm just giving you the idea of uncovered here, the word uncovered. It also looks like this idea of nakedness goes back to Genesis 3:7, and we know that story, where they made fig leaves. It speaks of shame and being exposed physically in Genesis chapter 3, verse 7. I was afraid because I was naked. Who told you were naked? And then we go through the whole thing, right? Now, moving forward a little bit, in Exodus chapter 20 and 28, and Leviticus chapter 18 and Leviticus 20, there is given to us a whole lot of treatment of the idea of nakedness or being uncovered, which causes a lot of speculation as to what it means here in chapter 9. Because it goes through a whole litany of things. I'm not even going to, you need to look up that for yourself to understand what I'm talking about. It could have been as simple as Ham seeing his father naked. You think that's how it was? It could have been that simple, all the way over to the basest, sexually participatory thing you and I can probably come up with, and I think we can do really evil thoughts if we want to. It can be from that to that and anything in between. All right? Based on what I just told you about the text. But common sense would tell you that it should have been something more than just Ham seeing his father naked. Why do I say that? Because of the severity of the curse placed on Canaan. And it's also interesting that while it was Ham who saw the nakedness of his father, it was Canaan who the curse got laid on. So, I mean, you can start your creative juices flowing there to try to figure some stuff out. Could Canaan have been there at the time? Could Canaan have been involved in a way not mentioned in the scriptures? Was Ham's sin so bad that his punishment was that he had to hear a prophecy of his own son's terrible destiny? Yes, we think it was, because he had to hear that prophecy. He did have to hear that prophecy. Several commentators, modern and old, so here's a slightly different take, which you might totally agree with. Several commentators, both modern day and old school, say that the ancient Hebrew, which I did not check because I didn't even know where to go look the ancient Hebrew up. The ancient Hebrew says that when Ham came out, and it says he told his brothers outside. So whatever happened in the tent, happened in the tent, and he came outside and told his brothers. It says he told his brothers with glee or delight. So he was happy about what he saw in a not a good way. He saw the shame and exposure and diminishing and perhaps even worse that his father was in that moment in a drunken stupor, or maybe passed out, we don't know. But he saw it and came out and told his brothers, guess what Dad just did? Guess what I just saw? Right? Many times, we know this to be true, some folks are very pleased when they see somebody caught in something that they have been guilty of themselves. Or that they start comparing to what they do in an effort to do what? Lessen their guilty feelings. Well, you know, Jimmy's doing that stuff, and I never did any of that stuff. He's way worse than me. You know, my piddly little thing compared to the terrible stuff he's done. Well, people do that, and it's a guilt assuager. It's salve put on a conscience that knows that at the very heart of our being, we're guilty before God. But when he looks through to us and to our being, he looks through Jesus Christ. So he sees righteousness, not in us, but in Jesus, and we're righteous through him. And I'm grateful for that. Amen. Very grateful for that. Lastly, God establishes a future plan regarding the nations, verses 25 through 29. So first thing he talks about Ham, but he talks about Ham through Canaan again, right? It's pushing through Canaan. He says he's going to be a servant of servants to his brothers. So in plain terms, that means he was going to be the lowest of the low on the socioeconomic scale. He was going to be the low guy. He was also going to be a low life in the view of his own relatives. It says to his brothers, he's going to be a low life. He's not going to be trusted. He's going to be viewed with contempt. I mean, this is terrible. This is everybody else around him. He's going to be terrible. But it also says something else, right? It says, and let him be a servant to both Shem and Japheth. It doesn't say servant of servants, does it? I found that interesting. I found that really interesting. Let Canaan be his servant. And then talking about Japheth, and let Canaan be his servant. He's not going to be let Canaan be his servant of servants. It's not the same level, right? It's not the same level of cursing or debasement or putting him in his place. Something else I found interesting is he curses Ham or Canaan, but he doesn't bless Shem. He blesses God for Shem. So that tells me something. It tells me if I push forward And if I push back, that based on the genealogies that I've looked at, I can get there that Shem he could be the channel by which the seed of the Messiah comes. He could be. Yeah. I also thought at the time, just from the text and without putting anything into it and without pushing forward or pushing back, it also seems like, just like Isaac blessing Jacob, and that it could just seem like he's given Shem the preeminent position in the family hierarchy. That's what it could be. Or that's what it seems like, just a raw reading of the text. He's just putting Shem out there first. You know, like the firstborn son kind of thing. But then he says, may God enlarge Japheth. So we'll study in the genealogies. I hope I'll do you justice in that. But based on what little bit I know today about Japheth's genealogy moving down through, is today his descendants as a people are the largest in number on planet Earth. The largest number, singular group on the planet Earth. And I think I'm right about that, because he goes in a couple of different directions, but I haven't studied it well enough. When we come back to that, I might be able to validate that for you. And they're also tend to be, based on the little snippet that I read, the most well-off people on earth as well. So may God enlarge Japheth. And then lastly, Noah lived 350 years after the flood. And then he died. He had no more children, because there's no genealogy. There's 3 guys, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. That's it. He had no more children. He is not recorded as having done anything else noteworthy in the last third of his life. It almost, I thought, when I read it, it almost seems like at the end it says, Noah lived 300 years after the flood, so all the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. It almost seemed to me like, and it doesn't in the next chapter tell you all any details about Noah. He's done. Mm-hmm. He's done for all practical purposes. He didn't do anything noteworthy in the last third of his life, but his ending was kind of abrupt, and it reminded me of Jonah. You know, at the end of the book of Jonah, there's no ending to the book. Noah's really angry, and he's sitting under a gourd, or up there close to a gourd that he was sitting under, and it died, and he's angry because God did what he said he was going to do. You know? So Noah, he just he does it, he's nondescript after that point. He doesn't do anything noteworthy. Yeah. His ministry, but on the positive side, let's think about what he did before the last 350 years. His ministry and work for the Lord was at this point accomplished. After he made these prophecies, he was done. And he lived a long time after that, but he was pretty much done. He lived almost not too far from the time of Abraham. Mm-hmm. But in the end, he died like the rest of humanity in a fallen world. And that's where we're all at today. But it's a new beginning for anybody who's in Christ. It's a new world. Even though we're in the same old world, it's a new day. Amen. So every time you get a chance, if the stars align, and I'm not saying that in an astrological way, but if it all lines up, I shouldn't have said that maybe, but if it all lines, just a phrase, but if it all lines up and you see an opening, take the chance. Yeah. Take the chance and tell them about Jesus. Amen. All right, let's close. Lord, thank you for your word. Thank you for what it teaches us. Thank you for loving us. Thank you for saving us. Lord, I pray that we will love you more because you first loved us. Lord, I pray as we go throughout the rest of the week, we'll look for opportunities. I pray that you'll give us those opportunities. And I pray that you'll bring us back to the next appointed time, and that we will be ready to hear fresh and new with open hearts and open minds what you have for us. Thank you and praise you so much in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Thanks, everybody.